To open up the day, we would invite Colin Destache.
Destache, yeah.
Destache. Thank you. Colin Destache. He's going to be presenting a paper titled A Lesson in Play from Games, the Ground, and Gadamer, bringing Lonergan's self-correction into relationship. So, Colin.
Thanks. I don't have any pretty slides like so many of you did yesterday, so hopefully your coffee and your donuts and things will keep you occupied for the duration of the talk. So Bernard Lonergan's method in theology offers us a framework for navigating the tension within and among the self and the other as he navigates isolated cognition and communal experience. Within it, the self-correcting interpreter is characterized by capacity for reflection, detecting error, adjustment, and serves as sort of a heartbeat related to Lonergan's inquiry. Situated within a process of self-transcendence, the self-correcting interpreter is not a passive observer, but an active and autonomous subject. Lonergan's attempt to provide a unitive model for interpretation is compelling, hence why we're all here and probably read so much of him, but I think it leaves one wanting more. This morning's consideration of Lonergan and what games, the ground, and the philosophy of Hans-Georg Gadamer might have to offer begins with a constructive critique of the self-corrector, as well as explores its limitations when it's considered as an isolated or individualized figure that risks what I think could be hermeneutical atomization. To address the gap, I propose placing interpreting and understanding within a dialogue of play, drawing on Gadamer's truth and method. Play functions as a dynamic, participatory, and communal mode of engagement that may enrich and complement the self-correcting interpreter. Beyond Gadamer, various cultural and theological accounts of play, embodiment, and relationship are explored. Through consideration of games, a theological anthropology of play provides a context for shaping new horizons. Indigenous ceremonies point play back to its sacred origins as a pedagogical tool for communities to teach, remember, and heal. Through consideration of the ground, indigenous knowledge assists in reframing understanding as a reciprocity between the land and people, where knowledge emerges not from isolation, but in participatory engagement with the living world. The variety of these threads offers the potential for a diverse account of interpretation and understanding. The goal here is not to discard the careful structure of method, but to affirm its seriousness and to include within method the necessity of joy, embodiment, relationship, in a way that infuses method with the generative nature of play in order to recover a critical and communal vision of interpretation that invites understanding and participation with the world. So Lonergan's self-correcting interpreter. Lonergan describes interpretation as something akin to the process of reaching understanding. There are basic operations involved. One has to understand words, objects, oneself, others. One has to understand one's interpretation that has led to such an understanding. There's certainly a method to his madness, though I wonder in this case if madness is brought on, at least in part, by the imposed environment of the interpreter. Lonergan's interpreter is self-correcting. This self-corrector, while not isolated in an absolute sense, leaves themselves to themselves. It's their own interaction with things outside of themselves and their self-interpretation of such things that to me seems a little too individualistic, I guess. I wonder, are there other self-correctors? Certainly there must be, but what is left appears as a collection of atomized individuals coming to an understanding only within themselves, leaving the world in a chaos, I guess, of a lack of common understanding. It's not as if the self-correcting interpreter is alone. They're social. Lonergan's functional specialties point to the variety of ways that the individual relates. History offers an account of the what-haves and the who-was. Dialectic lays out a communicative dialogue and debate which assumes a certain proximity to one another. Systematics infers that there are questions being asked for someone to answer. Communications assumes an audience in and of itself. Yet it appears that the self-correcting interpreter still leads the charge towards their own experience in loneliness and isolation. It is in a community or proximate to one that interpretation and understanding is sought. However, the notion that interpretation and understanding be common seems to be overshadowed by the self-driven nature of the self-corrector. Attempts to illustrate opportunities for coming together in Lonergan's insight, I think, are underemphasized, ignored, or trivial. Play for him appears to be, or would appear to be, a place for ripe with interpretive possibility when it comes to play. But for Lonergan, play appears to best left to play's juvenile participants until they are formed well enough with an aptitude for interpretation and understanding to fit into the world that we live in. So theologies and cultures of play. What might games have to offer? Games have been and remain integral to human experience. Games foster playfulness, creativity, socialization. They serve as powerful tools for building community, identity, and spiritual well-being. Play offers a transformational engagement that can cultivate personal, spiritual, and communal growth and connection. Play offers individuals and communities a meaningful engagement that transcends competition and connects the players to each other, to themselves, and, as some would argue, to the divine. In Play, Sport, and Spirit, Jesuit theologian Patrick Kelly reflects on the role of play and sport in human life, focusing particularly on how play and sport can serve as vehicles for spiritual and personal transformation. Kelly contends that play has been seen and be seen as a deeply spiritual endeavor. He says that play invites participants into a space of freedom, creativity, connection, and it is within the context of this freedom that Kelly sees play as a spiritual exercise, perhaps an Ignatian spiritual exercise of sorts, that offers individuals the opportunity to explore their identity, challenge their limitations, and deepen their relationships. Kelly asserts that play allows participants to engage with the world in a way that is fundamentally different from the everyday. What is engaged through play is something other than ordinary. It's imaginative, creative, playful, not bound by the constraints of utility or productivity. The subjective experience becomes a moment for transcendence, connecting one with the deepest parts of the self while remaining connected to the world around us. In sports and games, transcendence is made manifest. Kelly elaborates that games serve as sites where individuals can encounter a sense of sacredness or spirituality. Games allow participants to experience an elevated sense of consciousness, where the focus shifts from individual achievement to collective collaboration. It is a spiritual freedom mirrored by the broader human longing for meaning and connection, where play is understood not as pastime, but as an experienced reality that invites people toward one another and towards a purposeful connection. In contrast to modern, Western, and particularly American understanding of games as primarily recreational activity or competitive, Alan Downey's The Creator's Game, Lacrosse Identity and Indigenous Nationhood reveals the deeply spiritual and communal nature of games within the indigenous culture of the Haudenosaunee or the Iroquois people. He explores the sacred, prayerful, cultural, and medicinal practice that has been passed down through generations of Haudenosaunee as a gift from the Creator, playing an integral role in the spiritual, cultural, and communal life. Lacrosse, in this context, is a ritual experience reinforcing deep connection between nations, land, elders, ancestors, the world, and all of creation. Kelly emphasizes, or going back to Kelly, he emphasizes that games are not only spaces for individual expression and transcendence, they're opportunities to collaborate and communicate towards a common goal. This sense of community is crucial for him. Downey's analysis similarly underscores the game's role in reinforcing communal ties. It's not primarily or only a competitive sport. It's a communal place of engagement that strengthens relationships. Wherever and to whichever end the game is played, or wherever and to whichever end the game is played, the game brings people together, teaching the history, cultural values, life ways, or beliefs of a people to players and spectators alike. We see something in that direction in Western context. Games like soccer, basketball, football often serve as sites of local or national identity formation. Kelly elaborates that sports teams often embody the hopes, dreams, and collective aspirations of individuals, communities. Similarly, in indigenous cultures, games like lacrosse are imbued with a cultural significance that ties players to their heritage, their ancestors, their land. Games become a living expression of cultural continuity, a way for younger generations to participate in and honor the traditions of their forebears. So moving on to knowledge of the land, reciprocity and relational understanding. I'll look a bit at a book called Braiding Sweetgrass by a woman named Robin Wall-Kimmerer, in which she weaves together the wisdom of personal narrative as a Native person herself, indigenous knowledge, and scientific inquiry for her, being a biologist, to offer a vision of humanity's relationship with the earth as one of reciprocity, respect, and care. Kimmerer offers a framework for understanding how knowledge of the land can teach us to interact with both the earth and each other in ways that foster healing, and growth. The earth is not a passive backdrop for human activity, but an active, intelligent participant in an ongoing conversation of giving and receiving. Kimmerer illuminates a vision of knowledge and play that challenges the detachment, what she calls the detachment of Western scientific objectivity and the utilitarian values that dominate modern society, while encouraging us to leave space for playful engagement with the land in a way that can inform all our relationships. She presents an indigenous worldview which positions the land as an active participant in a relationship of mutual care and respect. The concept of reciprocity lies at the heart of this relationship. She repeatedly emphasizes that the land teaches one how to engage with it, drawing attention to the reciprocal process of learning to the land. Kimmerer writes of the land knowing us better than we know it. The earth offers wisdom in this reciprocal exchange where humanity and land transform one another. To truly listen to the land, one must first acknowledge that the earth has knowledge to offer in the first place. This is a lesson in humility. The humility is not a passive resignation, but rather an active engagement with the land that asks one to relinquish the arrogance of dominion and to adopt an act of reciprocity, respect, and care. By giving thanks and returning something to the land, we are engaged in a sort of play that strengthens our connection to the land and to one another. Something that is not a solitary activity, but a communal one, where each participates in a shared exchange or a communal and interconnected experience. And then finally, Gadamer and his notion of play and its relationship to identity, truth, and community. Gadamer offers, in Truth and Method, an exploration of how human beings come to understand, interpret, and engage with the world. One aspect of his hermeneutics is the idea of play, something understood as a deeply philosophical or phenomenological experience that reveals essential insights into truth, identity, as well as contributing to a sense of our community. For the purpose of this discussion, I'm bringing Lonergan's Self-Corrector out of isolation and into community. This truth-seeking, identity-forming, and community-sensing notion of play is a vital piece of the puzzle. By engaging with Gadamer, I believe Lonergan's atomized experience of the truth is challenged with an invitation to a dynamic and relational understanding of human existence discovered while at play. Gadamer aims to rethink or reconsider the nature of human understanding and truth. Central to his hermeneutic is the rejection of the idea that understanding can be detached from historical and cultural context, something he elaborates on in his development of a historically affected consciousness. Gadamer's notion of play operates as a critical term for understanding how meaning is not simply a fixed objective reality that can be grasped by the individual or the subject. Instead, play reveals the dynamic and relational nature of meaning and the dynamic and relational way by which meaning is grasped or achieved. Meaning emerges through the interaction between the object and the subject. Each has something to give and receive through the playful dynamic of interpretation. The idea of play presented by Gadamer, I think, is connected to his concept of fusion of horizons, which refers to the idea that understanding occurs when two or more perspectives are brought into a dialogical relationship. This process doesn't entail one perspective being imposed on another. Rather, the process involves a mutual transformation of subjects. Through this playful dialogue, the horizons of both the interpreter and the interpreted are broadened and new understandings emerge. Play serves as a model. For Gadamer, play serves as a model of this dialogical process of understanding. Dialogue becomes playful. Play involves dialogue. An individual is not merely a passive recipient, but an active participant in this exchange. The player of a game or a sport in more modern context is not left with a fixed identity, but is also always in the process of negotiation and transformation with whom they play the game with. They're not reshaped in isolation, but in a communal sense. Identity is not simply given, it remains in flux. For Gadamer, this implies that identity is always open to development. The fusion of horizons is always embedded within and affecting the identity of the individual and their broader communities. Throughout Truth and Method, Gadamer argues that the traditional or historical philosophical view of truth must be abandoned in favor of a more relational or process-oriented understanding, perhaps a play-oriented understanding. He suggests that truth is a dynamic and ongoing process similar to that which unfolds through dialogue and interaction. Just as a game is open-ended, is an open-ended interactive process that creates meaning through participation, so too is truth something which is constantly in motion, shaped through the playful dynamism of the interaction between interpreter and world, individual and community, subject and object. Gadamer's view of truth as relational and dynamic can be seen as a rejection of the epistemological framework that underpins some other modern philosophy. Gadamer emphasizes that truth is always mediated by history, culture, and language. It is not a method or technique to be applied, but rather an event that happens as an unfolding process takes place within the context of human experience and interaction. In the context of play, truth is never fully determined or fixed. Rather, truth and understanding emerges through the ongoing interaction between the player, the rules of what is being played, and the community in which the play takes place. This view of truth and understanding as a dynamic process of play has significant implications in understanding how one comes to know the world, how our identity is formed, and how one engages with another. Truth and understanding are not something discovered in isolation, but something that emerges from the relational nature of play between a subject and the world that they're in proximity to. So finally, or kind of to wrap up, the social correcting interpretation, Lonergan's interpreter in relationship. So throughout the paper, I propose ways of reimagining, reconsidering, or reinterpreting the self-corrector discussed by Lonergan that enable transformation from self to social through the relationship provided in play. Play that is dynamic, participatory, communal, engaging. The subject is socialized through play. Through one's playfulness with their surroundings, correction moves beyond the isolated and individual into the community of relations proximate to one's living and being. Games and sports Games of sport and games of tradition or ceremony help provide a foundational anthropology from which horizons can be viewed and transformations can be realized through the pedagogical tools that play offers. The ground as a living and breathing relative for one to live in reciprocity with can be revealed in the timeless wisdom of indigenous knowledge that opens up a level of relationship often missed. One touches and is touched by their relations in the social reciprocity of games and the ground, infusing the isolation of self-correction with a sociability leading to a depth and a breadth of understanding and interpretation. Through playful groundedness, Lonergan's Self-Corrector is brought in by the relationships in and of cultures that provide a space for participatory and playful understanding and interpretation of the world. And just sort of as a response, Dr. Major posed a question to us about she challenged us with a question about thinking outside of the colonial framework and how some of the discussions we'll have this weekend might contribute to that. Contribute to something different than even a decolonial or post-colonial framework. And I guess in light of this paper, I wonder what play might have to offer as a way out of the colonial framework. Play requires cooperation, reciprocity, responsiveness. What has happened in play informs what is happening and what will continue to happen, but it does not limit the unfolding of the event that participants engage in playfully. Those engaged in play cooperate in co-creating their future, having an impact on what unfolds immediately in the present and what will continue to unfold into future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Colin. And now we can take some questions. You want to direct that?
Sure.
Okay.
Oscar, saw you first.
So thank you so much, Colin, for your presentation. You have really made my day.
There's a lot of day left.
The struggles that we had last semester going through Gadamer and Lonergan method in theology and Ricard, you have really helped me really to put everything together. And I love the way you have really made it very contextual. So my question is this. Connecting your talk to yesterday's talks on synodal dance. Mm-hmm. So is synodal dance like taking it as a play and bringing in the idea of self-correcting, the self-correcting process of understanding? Do you think that in this dance, when one or several people are out of the tune, the self-correcting process must start from the individual, looking at the community so that they can correct their rhythm of dance in order to fit into the synodal dance, so that the individual and the community are in a dialectical tension. Mm-hmm. The fourth specialty. Is it the fourth? If I can remember, it's the fourth.
I certainly don't know if it's the fourth. It's one of them, but I think I am hesitant to say where it may start, but certainly the self-correction has a role in it, and it almost strikes me as sort of like a chicken egg type of reality where, yes, the self-corrector might say make a decision to change the tune to try and get the group back in with the dancing in step with one another. But they're only doing that in response to what others are doing. So the communal individual tension still remains. The self-corrector is certainly important, whether it starts there or whether the corrector is responding to something else. I guess I'm not sure or can't confidently say. And one thing I didn't want to do with the paper is throw out the idea of the self-corrector. That's still important, but to make sure that it remains not only in tension but really strongly even bound to the community or the communities that it's a part of.
Yeah, and this self-corrector must look at the sense of the community, the sense as communists, to even think about the correcting itself. Right,
and the census communist is going to, besides motivate them to look, maybe even influence the adjustments that they're making.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very rich paper. I am not a Lebanesian, I'm not a Lonerganian scholar. I'm more a Lebanesian person, so it will reflect.
Me either. I'm just a student that Joseph tried to help figure out. So if you have really specific questions about Lonergan, we'll turn to.
Nice try. So, the first comment I want to make, and then I'll ask you a question. Play begins not first in the communion, but in the differentiation. It is in the difference that makes play possible. But differentiation is not an insular grounding. It's already grounded in a social world. The grounding is in the social world. That said, disruption, so play, the power of play is that it allows for disruptive awakening, which allows for possibilities for, like, for example, I'm playing basketball, there is a disruption that occurs, which is not even predicted by because of the multiple disruptions that are occurring there. Now, that said, and I love how you were moving into truths. How would you, I want you to be very specific how you can use this to push for rethinking of dogmas, especially in the world we live in today, where there seems to be an erroneous understanding of dogma as semper idem, always the same. So if differentiation and the disruptive awakening is really in the domain how truth also manifests itself as you are talking about, so then dogmas must not be seen as something that is settled. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There are implications. I was wondering why you were not going there. But I was like, okay, let me go there with you.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, I'm tempted to want to lean on some notion of the settledness of dogma, even though I very personally appreciate like the desire to press and shape and mold. And if there are other things like within Lonergan's framework, like systematics maybe, that help us understand questions around how we think of or interpret dogma, maybe that is a place where play can push against this idea that dogma is settled, so we can't even like think or question about it. It's like, okay, even if dogma is settled within like the structure of a church or something like that, how we can understand it, apply it, and then maybe leave room for it to evolve or develop in new ways, because of how we're responding to what is happening like in the present, taking questions, theological questions, for example, in the context of like what is going on in the world, what's informing how we're thinking or relating to them in the first place. I'd be interested in talking more about that question, though.
Okay, we can get one more.
One more? Yeah.
Well, thanks. You know, I think what you contributed here goes beyond the critical starting point in Lonergan's alleged individualistic understanding of the self-corrector. Let's say I have a question about that, validity of that critique. But, so put that aside, what you presented in terms of play and Gadamer is just wonderful. It's really good. So I think it's independently valuable and constructive and rich. I do think in back of Gadamer, of course, is Heidegger, and there the idea of truth is unconcealment, where that which is known is active. You kind of touch on that, and Gadamer does too. But I think that's a very powerful resource. And I think there Lonergan does have something to learn from that tradition of Heidegger, Gadamer, etc. But in general, I think what you're working on is terrific. We're players on Team Lonergan, I guess. I don't know whether he's the quarterback or the coach. but I'm not so sure about the isolation of the knower as self-corrector, nor as learner, self-corrector, whatever. Consciousness is always intentional. The we precedes the I-thou differentiation at the outset of the chapter on meaning. So he's aware of that, but individual as the negative side of person, or not the negative, it's person understood in a limited degree. So I think you do have to deal with the whole of modern philosophy is the turn to the subject. Lonergan's the subject. Is the subject isolated? Not necessarily, but there is a focus on the individual, no question.
Yeah.
So that's why I think your engagement with that is really rich, and thanks for it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Actually, I want to thank you for the ground. That connection, I think it's very important. And I know that in certain religions or cultures, they decide not to wear shoes to maintain that connection. So great presentation.